For thousands of years, the galaxy had forgotten about Earth. The name, human, was nothing more than a whisper told in dark corners of alien taverns. Old star maps no longer marked the Sol system, and no species remembered the wars that once shook the stars. They believed humanity was wiped out in its own chaos, consumed by pride and fire. To the young races, humans were a bedtime story, a ghost species that once fought like beasts and vanished. On the shining world of Viralon, home of the mighty Zaarcan Empire, cadets trained under twin suns. Among them was Lieutenant Raltor, a proud warrior with violet skin and golden eyes. He often mocked the old tales of humans, calling them fiction meant to make aliens feel brave. Humans, he said to his classmates with a smirk. A myth, nothing more, just a story to scare children. The others laughed with him, never realizing that their laughter would soon die in their throats. In the high towers of the Zaarcan Academy, history was rewritten to erase humanity's legacy. The archives described Earth's fall as self-inflicted, the result of greed and foolish wars. No one dared to imagine that somewhere, beyond the rim of known space, the last of humanity survived. Hidden behind dust storms and dark nebulae, their colonies had grown silent, cold, and patient. While the galaxy evolved, humans rebuilt in secret, guided by ancient AI beacons that never stopped transmitting one message. Remember who you are. Far from any star, a forgotten satellite blinked awake after 1,000 years of silence. It was small, broken, and covered in space dust, but its signal pulsed like a heartbeat. Within its memory core, coordinates began to flash, forming a pattern that led back to the cradle of humanity. The signal traveled through the void, through wormholes, through time, until it reached them. And somewhere in the shadows, a fleet stirred. Back on Viralon, the Zaarcan Council gathered in their grand chamber. The Supreme Admiral stood tall, his voice full of arrogance. Our sensors have detected strange warp energy beyond the outer ring, a commander reported. The Admiral laughed. Probably pirates or traders testing our border. But the energy readings grew stronger every hour, and the pattern of the signal was unlike anything they had seen before. It was rhythmic, organic, almost like a pulse. In the Academy Observatory, Raltor watched the stars, unaware that history was changing. He saw a faint flash near the edge of the sky, and his tail twitched nervously. Maybe the humans are coming back, he joked, but for the first time, his laugh felt hollow. The light grew brighter over the next few nights, spreading like a scar across the sky. The teachers said it was a collapsing star, but no one truly believed that. Then came the sound, a deep vibration that shook the planet's atmosphere. Viralon's moons flickered as hundreds of warp signatures appeared at once. Sensors failed to identify them, and chaos spread across the command decks. The Admiral shouted for reports, but the screens only displayed one word. Origin. Sol. Raltor ran to the windows of the Academy Tower, his heart pounding. Above the horizon, streaks of light began to pierce the sky. They were not meteors, they were ships. Sleek, dark, enormous, and glowing with blue thrusters that roared like ancient storms. Each bore a symbol, a simple blue circle with a white line through it. The forgotten flag of Earth. The first transmission echoed through every comm channel in the system. A calm human voice spoke through static, cold and commanding. This is the Terran battle fleet. It said, stand down and identify yourselves. The aliens froze, their laughter gone, their arrogance shattered. They had mocked the myth, and now the myth stood above their world. From the void, thousands of human warships aligned in perfect formation. Their hulls reflected starlight like polished obsidian. Their weapons hummed with restrained fury. At the center floated the HSS Valkyrie, its captain's eyes burning with purpose. For centuries, humanity had been forgotten, erased, and mocked. But now, the galaxy would remember their name again. Raltor whispered in disbelief. They were real. As the first human ship broke the clouds, the sky turned white. The legend of humanity had returned, not as a story, but as a storm. The air trembled as the first human ships broke through the atmosphere. They did not roar like alien crafts or hum like Zaarcan vessels. They thundered, shaking the very bones of the planet. People across Viralon stopped what they were doing and stared at the heavens. The twin suns dimmed behind the silhouettes of hundreds of metallic giants descending through clouds of flame. From the Academy towers, Lieutenant Raltor watched the impossible. The myths he mocked had come alive before his eyes. Columns of light streaked across the sky as human ships took position in the upper stratosphere. Their formation was perfect, precise, disciplined, terrifying. Each ship moved like part of one body, guided by unseen coordination. On the largest of them, the HSS Valkyrie, Admiral Eleanor Graves stood before the viewing deck. Her eyes scanned the planet below, blue oceans, green forests, shining cities, unaware that they were now under human gaze. "Begin transmission," she said quietly, her voice calm but unyielding. "Attention, Virilon Command." The broadcast echoed across the alien world. "This territory is under observation by the Terran Alliance." No one on Virilon knew what Terran Alliance meant, but every commander felt the same chill crawl down their spine. Inside the ZYRKN council chamber, panic replaced arrogance. Admirals shouted over one another, trying to find a rational explanation. "No species could hide for 1,000 years and return like this," one cried. Another slammed his fist against the table. "Then who are they?" The Supreme Admiral stared at the live feed on the screen. Hundreds of ships hovering just beyond reach, glowing like stars of judgment. On the surface, sirens blared as soldiers scrambled to defensive positions. Anti-air cannons locked onto the human fleet, but no one dared fire first. Then a deep voice echoed through the comms, human, cold, and clear. "This is not an invasion," it said. "This is a reminder." The words struck deeper than any weapon could. Raltor's training failed him. His hands shook as he looked up. The Academy dome reflected the descending warships like burning suns. He remembered every laugh, every arrogant word, every time he had mocked the idea of humans. Now, as the sky glowed red and blue, he realized the legends had been warnings, not myths. From orbit, human drones launched in silence, falling through the clouds like silver rain. They did not attack. They simply hovered over cities, scanning structures and broadcasting frequencies. Every system on Virilon flickered and went dark, communication lines jammed by unknown technology. The humans controlled the skies, the ground, and even the airwaves. They didn't need to fire a single shot, and yet they already ruled the battlefield. Admiral Graves stood silently, watching the alien capital on the main display. Behind her, officers spoke in soft, measured tones. "Enemy defenses active but holding fire, ma'am," one said. She nodded slowly. "They will break soon enough." Her voice was not cruel. It was certain, like someone who had seen too many wars to doubt the outcome. Aboard the alien flagship Zyros, Supreme Admiral Kellen gritted his teeth. "Target their lead ship," he ordered, his pride refusing to bow. But before the command could be executed, all targeting systems froze. The display screens turned blue, showing only one symbol, the old Earth insignia. Then a message appeared in human language, automatically translated across every interface. "We remember." The alien bridge went silent, the crew staring in horror. No one had ever hacked a ZYRKN ship before. Kellen's breath trembled. "This is impossible," he whispered. Raltor, watching from the Academy, felt the same disbelief crawl through him. This was no simple fleet. This was vengeance shaped by time. A return not of war, but of judgment. The humans did not destroy the cities. They did not bomb or burn. They hovered above the world like silent gods, their message clear. They could, but they chose not to. And that mercy terrified the aliens more than any weapon. When the first dawn rose after the fleet's arrival, the people of Virilon no longer laughed at human myths. Every child looked at the sky and whispered the same word their ancestors had forgotten. Humans. The legend was real, and the galaxy had begun to tremble once again. For 3 days, the human fleet hung motionless above Virilon. They neither advanced nor retreated. Their engines glowed faintly like blue stars frozen in the sky. No sound came from them. No weapon fired. Yet their presence weighed heavier than any bombardment. The ZYRKN Empire had faced many enemies, but never this kind of silence. The kind that made soldiers forget how to breathe. Every government broadcast tried to calm the citizens, saying it was a negotiation, not surrender. But the people had already seen the truth in the sky. The humans had returned, and they were beyond fear. Inside the alien capital, the council gathered again, desperate and restless. Supreme Admiral Kellen's voice broke the tension. "They claim this is not an invasion," he said. "Then what do they want?" No one answered. Then, at exactly the same moment across every screen, every channel, and every communication tower, the same human symbol appeared, a blue circle crossed by a white line. It pulsed once, then a calm human voice spoke. "This is Admiral Eleanor Graves of the Terran Battle Fleet," she said, her tone steady and without pride. "We come not to conquer, but to remind the galaxy of what it chose to forget." The words echoed through every home, every base, every ship orbiting Virulon. "Once, humanity stood among you as equals," she continued. "We traded, built, fought, and bled beside your ancestors. But when the great collapse came, you closed your gates and left us to die." Her voice remained quiet, yet every listener felt the weight of it pressing on their chest. Raltor stood among a crowd gathered in the Academy courtyard, eyes fixed on the massive projection of the Admiral's face. For the first time in his life, he felt small. "Humans were the storm you feared, and so you erased us from history," Graves said. "But erasing memory does not erase truth." Behind her, the fleet began to shift slightly, the ships forming a vast pattern that glowed like wings of light. "Now we return not for vengeance, but for justice," she said. "The alliance you abandoned has returned to reclaim its voice." On the ZYRKN flagship, the Admiral clenched his fists. "Justice?" he muttered bitterly. "They seek revenge dressed as peace." Yet deep inside, he knew there was guilt, a guilt buried by centuries of silence. The galaxy had ignored Earth's cries for help when its last colonies fell. And now, those cries had come back as thunder. Admiral Graves looked toward her officers. "Prepare the second message," she ordered. Moments later, enormous holographic displays projected from the human fleet, visible from the ground. They showed ancient footage, humans fighting side by side with alien soldiers, human engineers repairing ZYRKN ships, human medics saving alien wounded. The crowd on Virulon watched in silence as history rewrote itself before their eyes. The Admiral's voice returned, softer this time. "Your ancestors called us monsters, but we were builders, explorers, and dreamers. We did not vanish," she said. "We endured. And now we ask one question. Does the galaxy still believe in unity, or has it learned nothing?" The broadcast ended with no demand, no threat. Just silence, heavy and thoughtful. The humans waited, patient as ever. They knew the power of words could cut deeper than any weapon. In the days that followed, the ZYRKN Empire divided from within. Some called for war, others for peace. Young cadets like Raltor began to question everything they had been taught. He replayed the human transmission again and again, listening to the calm certainty in Admiral Graves' voice. There was no hatred there, only truth, and that frightened him most of all. At night, the human ships shimmered above the clouds like silent constellations. The people of Virulon began to whisper prayers to them, not out of worship, but out of awe. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt what humans had always been known for, the power to inspire. And as Raltor looked up into the burning sky, he understood something that his empire never had. The humans had not returned to destroy. They had returned to remind the stars what courage looked like. The galaxy had gone silent. Across the stars, entire civilizations paused their wars, their trade, their transmissions. The message of humanity had spread faster than any fleet ever could. Every world that once called humans a myth now watched the skies in uneasy wonder. On Virulon, the ZYRKN Council chamber remained in chaos. The air was thick with fear and pride. Humans returned speaking of peace, yet they surround us with warships, barked Admiral Kellen. Another council member replied quietly, "Perhaps they no longer need weapons to win." His words hung in the air like smoke. Outside, the streets filled with citizens staring upward. Children pointed at the shimmering human fleet, their eyes wide with fascination. Some called it divine punishment, others called it destiny. For the first time in ZYRKN history, their empire felt small beneath another's shadow. At the academy, Raltor sat alone on the observatory steps. He replayed the message of Admiral Graves again and again. The calmness in her voice unsettled him more than any threat could. Humans did not sound like conquerors. They sounded like ghosts returned to finish an unfinished story. In orbit, aboard the HSS Valkyrie, Admiral Graves stood beside the communication deck. Her officers waited silently, watching the flickering signals from alien transmissions. "Some worlds have acknowledged receipt of our message," one officer said. "Others have gone dark." Graves nodded slowly. "They are deciding whether to kneel or to fight." She turned toward the viewport, her reflection faint against the blue glow of Earth's old insignia. "We were forgotten once," she whispered. "Let them decide what kind of memory we will become." Back on Virulon, the council debated through the long night. Some demanded to strike first and show strength. Others pleaded to open communication and seek understanding. "Peace is surrender," one general shouted. "If we kneel, the galaxy will follow." But another stood and answered, "If we fight, we may end everything." The Supreme Admiral's eyes burned with conflict, caught between duty and truth. Outside the council tower, massive holograms of human ships floated silently. Their shadows stretched across the capital like moving mountains. Every citizen could see them, and in their presence, old arrogance crumbled into questions. Who were these humans that carried both mercy and power in equal measure? At dawn, a decision had to be made. Admiral Kellen rose from his seat, his armor glinting under the pale light. "Send a transmission to the human fleet," he ordered, his voice steady. "We will hear their terms." His words spread through the command centers, through the city, through every heart that had waited in fear. Raltor felt something stir inside him, not dread, but curiosity. For the first time, he wanted to understand the species he had mocked. Minutes later, aboard the Valkyrie, the message arrived. "ZYRKAN Empire requests dialogue," the comms officer announced. Admiral Graves closed her eyes briefly, as if remembering the voices of those lost to time. "Prepare the diplomatic channel," she said. "It begins." In the grand chamber of the alien capital, a massive projection flickered to life. The image of Admiral Graves appeared before the entire council. She stood tall in her black uniform, the flag of Earth behind her. The aliens expected rage, but instead, she spoke softly. "You feared humanity because you did not understand it," she said. "We are not your enemy, but we will not let history repeat itself." Her gaze was calm, her tone heavy with unspoken grief. "Why return now?" one alien counselor asked, his voice trembling. Graves looked at him, her eyes distant as though staring through centuries. "Because the galaxy is forgetting what unity costs," she said. "And we have paid that price once already." Outside, the skies shimmered as the human fleet shifted position, not in threat, but in display, 1,000 engines igniting in synchronized brilliance. The world below glowed under their light, like a planet reborn. Raltor watched from the academy roof, his heart pounding. He no longer felt anger or fear, only awe. The myth had become truth, and truth had become a choice. As night fell again, the voice of Admiral Graves echoed across every frequency. "Choose wisely," she said, "for the stars remember longer than we live." And with that, the transmission ended, leaving the galaxy to decide its own fate. The sky above Virulon still burned blue, but this time, it was not the fire of destruction, it was the dawn of something new. The words of Admiral Graves spread across the galaxy like a storm of light. Every world that had once mocked the name human now faced the same question. Would they join the reborn Terran Alliance, or stand against the return of the forgotten species? On Virulon, the decision divided the Empire deeper than ever before. Half of the Council wanted peace, believing the humans spoke truth. The other half demanded war, claiming the message was only a trick to weaken them. In the streets, protests erupted, banners of defiance clashed with symbols of surrender. The skies that once burned with human ships now glowed with the reflection of unrest below. Lieutenant Raltor stood among the confusion, watching his world tear itself apart. He no longer knew which side he belonged to. He had mocked humanity, then feared them, and now he felt drawn toward their strength. He replayed the words of Admiral Graves again and again. "Choose wisely, for the stars remember longer than we live." Those words haunted him like a melody he could not forget. Inside the ZYRKAN command tower, Admiral Kellen faced betrayal. A faction of generals had secretly opened communication with another empire, the Croft-TH Dominion. They promised to stand together and drive the humans back. But even the Dominion feared the human fleet that hovered beyond the edge of the system. No one truly believed victory was possible, only that pride demanded resistance. That night, a coded message reached the HSS Valkyrie. ZYRKAN command preparing alliance with Croft-TH forces. The report read. Admiral Graves stood silent for a long moment, her gaze distant. They will test us, she said softly. Then let them see what patience costs. She turned to her officers. Deploy Observation Squadron 7. No aggression, no retaliation, only truth. The humans were not preparing to strike. They were preparing to reveal. Meanwhile, Raltor discovered the secret transmissions himself. Working late in the Academy control room, he intercepted encrypted signals leaving the planet. He listened in disbelief as his own superiors spoke of war behind closed doors. His heart pounded as he realized his people were preparing to betray the fragile peace. For the first time in his life, he faced a choice that would define his future: loyalty to his empire or to the truth. The next morning, the first Croft-TH ships appeared in orbit. Their black hulls reflected the light of Virulon's suns. They positioned themselves opposite the human fleet, a display of strength. But the humans did not react. Their ships remained still, silent, glowing faintly like patient stars. Then, without warning, a series of broadcasts erupted across every channel. It was the intercepted communication, the proof of betrayal. Someone had leaked it, and every word played live before the entire planet. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Who did this? The generals shouted. Who exposed our plans? But the people were no longer listening to them. They were listening to the humans, who had already anticipated the treachery. A transmission from Admiral Graves filled the skies once again. Her voice was calm, firm, and unbroken. We do not punish deceit with fire, she said. We expose it with truth. And as she spoke, the holograms above Virulon displayed every secret conversation, every order of betrayal, every false promise of unity. The Empire saw itself, naked, divided, and ashamed. Raltor watched the broadcast in silence, tears burning his eyes. The humans had not attacked. They had simply revealed what was already broken. He realized then that humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or strength. It was their understanding of hearts, of pride, of consequence. Admiral Kellen sank into his chair, his pride shattered. He whispered to himself, "They are not here for war. They are here to teach us." And for the first time, the old warrior bowed his head, not in defeat, but in respect. From the Valkyrie, Admiral Graves looked down upon Virulon's trembling cities. Lesson 1 is complete, she said quietly. They now understand what truth costs. Her second-in-command turned to her. And the next lesson? Graves stared into the void, where 100 other worlds waited. The next lesson, she said, will test who among them still remembers what it means to stand with humanity. Below, Raltor made his choice. He removed the insignia of the ZYRKAN military from his uniform and looked toward the burning blue sky. He whispered to himself, I will remember. And somewhere deep in orbit, the human sensors caught his voice and recorded it. One small echo in a galaxy learning, at last, what loyalty truly means. The galaxy had not seen peace in centuries. Empires rose and fell, each claiming to bring order, each leaving behind scars. But now, after humanity's return, something began to shift in the hearts of millions. Not through conquest, but through awakening. The broadcast of truth from Virulon echoed through every star system. No one could deny what they had seen. Human ships had hovered above the skies without firing a single shot. Yet their silence had broken the pride of entire civilizations. The story spread like light through darkness. Humans had returned, not as tyrants, but as mirrors. On the surface of Virulon, cities once filled with chaos were now quiet. The people no longer shouted for war or peace. They simply watched, waiting to understand. Lieutenant Raltor stood at the Academy courtyard, staring up at the shimmering fleet. He had made his choice, but he did not know if the humans would ever hear it. Then one morning, a small human shuttle descended through the clouds. landing near the Academy's open ground. It was the first time in 1,000 years that a human had set foot on alien soil. From the craft stepped Commander Lien Hayes, her armor black with glowing blue lines like living light. She carried no weapon, only a data slate bearing the symbol of Earth. The ZYRKan soldiers surrounded her, unsure whether to salute or to aim their rifles. Raltor stepped forward before anyone could act. He bowed his head slightly. "I am Lieutenant Raltor of the ZYRKan Empire," he said, his voice trembling. "Welcome back to the galaxy." Hayes looked at him, her eyes calm but sharp. "Then let us rebuild it together," she said. Inside the Academy Hall, she met with the remaining leaders of the ZYRKan Council. Admiral Kellen, weary but humbled, spoke first. "You could have destroyed us," he said. "Why didn't you?" Commander Hayes placed the data slate on the table, its surface lighting up with a map of the stars. "Because destruction is easy," she said. "Unity is harder and far more powerful." She turned the map so they could all see. "These are the lost colonies, human outposts hidden for generations, some alive, some gone silent." She pointed to the glowing lines connecting worlds. "Humanity does not wish to rule," she said. "We wish to rebuild what was lost, together." The council exchanged uneasy looks. "Together," one of them asked, "after what our ancestors did?" Hayes nodded slowly. "The past cannot be erased," she said, "but it can be rewritten with courage." Her words spread across the chamber like a quiet fire, burning through years of arrogance and fear. Outside, citizens gathered to see the human officer walking among them. Children reached out their hands, curious and unafraid. For the first time, humans and aliens stood side by side under the same sky. And something changed that day. The myth became a memory, and the memory became hope. From orbit, Admiral Graves watched the scene unfold on her display. "First contact completed successfully," her officer reported. Graves smiled faintly. "Not first contact," she said. "First reunion." Her words carried through the command deck like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Prepare a diplomatic convoy," she ordered. "We move to the next world. They must see what unity looks like." Meanwhile, Raltor followed Commander Hayes to the human shuttle. He looked at the Earth insignia painted across its hull. "Your people were erased from our history," he said quietly. Hayes smiled gently. "Then it's time to write it again." She offered him her hand. "We're building something greater than empires now, Raltor. We're building understanding." He hesitated, then took her hand firmly. And at that moment, the last shadow of fear between their species finally broke. As the shuttle lifted back toward the fleet, the people of Virulon looked up and cheered. The sound carried across the valleys and oceans, a sound no one had heard for ages: unity. Across the stars, other empires watched in silence. Some with envy, some with awe, but all with the same thought: the humans were leading again. Admiral Graves watched the data stream from dozens of worlds lighting up with messages of contact. The old alliances were waking, and the Terran flag once again shone across the heavens. She stood before her crew and spoke softly. "They called us myths," she said. "Now we become memory, and memory lasts forever." And as the human fleet spread its wings across the galaxy, the stars themselves seemed to burn brighter. For the first time in 1,000 years, the universe was not afraid of humanity. It was inspired by it. The stars had grown quiet again, but it was no longer the silence of fear. It was the calm that follows awakening, the kind that comes when truth replaces myth. The Terran battle fleet no longer hovered as a threat. It had become a symbol. Across hundreds of worlds, beings of every color, shape, and voice now spoke the name, human, with reverence. It had begun with fear, then curiosity, and finally respect. The humans had not conquered a single world, yet they had changed them all. Their strength was not in weapons, but in the way they made others see themselves. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy spoke of unity instead of domination. On Virulon, banners of the new Terran Alliance Pact fluttered beside alien flags. Where once there had been soldiers, now stood builders, scholars, and dreamers. Human engineers shared their technology with species that had once mocked them. ZYRKan scientists exchanged ideas with human explorers. The academy that once denied the existence of Earth now taught its history as truth. Lieutenant Raltor stood before his students. He was no longer a soldier. He was a teacher. Behind him, a great hologram of Earth revolved slowly, its oceans glowing blue. He spoke softly. We used to laugh at this world, thinking it was gone, but it never truly left us. He looked out at the young faces, Zwyrkan, Croft Th, and even human children sitting side by side. The lesson of humanity is simple, he said. They fought, they fell, and they rose again, not to rule, but to remind. Far above, the HSS Valkyrie drifted silently through the stars. Admiral Eleanor Graves watched the endless field of light beyond her window. Reports flowed across her desk, worlds joining the alliance, fleets disarming, colonies rebuilding. For the first time in her long career, she allowed herself to breathe. Status of reconstruction? She asked quietly. Her second-in-command smiled. Progress everywhere. Admiral, even the Croft Th have requested talks. Graves nodded. Then the message has reached where no weapon ever could. Late that night, she walked alone to the observation deck. There, a single star burned brighter than the rest. Sol, the birthplace of it all. She whispered to it, as if to an old friend. They said we were myths, but you knew we would return. Her reflection shimmered in the glass, her uniform faintly illuminated by the glow of Earth's distant light. All that we were, all that we became, it was never about power, she said. It was about memory. From orbit, thousands of human and alien ships now flew together. Their combined lights formed constellations that could be seen from the surface of distant planets. They called them the bridges of Earth, glowing trails across the night sky to symbolize peace. Everywhere the fleets traveled, they carried not commands, but knowledge, the kind that built civilizations. On one of those missions, a young pilot recorded a final message. To whoever finds this in the future, he said, remember that humanity was never the center of the galaxy. We were simply the reminder that even the smallest spark can light 1,000 suns. The message spread across the network, and soon every world began to repeat the same words. It became known as the legacy of Earth, a vow carried by every race that chose unity over pride. Years later, the story of humanity's return became legend again. Not a tale of fear, but one of hope. Children on distant moons pointed at the night sky and asked their parents, "Where did the humans go?" And their parents smiled and said, "They never left. They became the light that guides us." Admiral Graves' voice echoed through the halls of the Valkyrie one last time. Where we once fought to survive, we now exist to inspire, she said. Let no world forget what it means to be human. And with that, the fleet began its slow journey beyond the charted stars, not to conquer, but to explore. As the last of the Terran ships vanished into the starlight, Raltor looked up from his classroom and smiled. He raised his hand toward the sky and whispered the words his students had learned by heart. Humanity is not a myth, he said. It is a promise. And across the galaxy, countless voices echoed it back. A chorus of unity, built from the fire of one forgotten world, now eternal.